So with that being said, let us move to the great Beff Jezos. I'm going to hop on call with him right now.
All right, awesome. Let's get started, Beff. Awesome to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me virtually. Couldn't make it in person this time, so appreciate everyone being flexible. Plus, it makes me look more mysterious, I guess. So that's it's great that I can hear the crowd. Okay, well, this talk should probably be 45 minutes, so I hope everyone is zooted on Diet Coke, because we're going to cover just about everything, meaning of life, the universe, and everything in 15 minutes, so, nothing more, nothing less. So let's get into it. Okay, so, I prepared these slides for the past couple hours. I didn't know I needed slides, but here we are. So it was a nice opportunity to prepare this talk. So I'll be talking about the physics of EA and how you can find meaning and purpose from the middle out. Okay. So today we'll cover where did we come from, why are we here, and where we're going. Right. So where do we come from? We're going to cover some basic physics principles about the origin of life and selectivity. So where do we come from? Okay. Well, we can zoom out. To the Big Bang, right? There was early quantum fluctuations, and the world organized, the universe organized itself into structures through gravity, right? And you had this sort of Big Bang and then this inflation. And those, in a previous career, I used to study quantum fluctuations and the cosmos, and I was looking for answers about where we come from and what is the meaning of life. I couldn't find them really, and the reality is that I was missing out on the middle. All the beauty happens in the middle, in the mesoscales, right? And so, in terms of space and time, if we go to medium scales, such as life on Earth, well, we started primordial Earth, and then we had a Cambrian explosion of life and all sorts of evolutionary adaptation. And then we have Earth today. And actually, let's zoom in to this scale in terms of space and time to really understand what drives life and civilization. And so I have this saying, thermodynamics rules everything around me. But essentially that's true, right? Because day-to-day life is not in the quantum physical realm or multi-galactic scale. It's a day-to-day scale. And most things day-to-day, from molecules, proteins, cells to ourselves and cars and technology, mostly operate in the thermodynamic regime, right, of scales. We're not cosmic or the quantum scale. And so turns out that life is a very special form of matter. So sort of energy-seeking fire. It seeks out free energy in the environment, it consumes it for its own replication and growth, and it produces more heat than inanimate matter. And that's very important because the universe likes that, right? But why did life come about? Why do we have all this multi-scale adaptation going on at all times, right? Well, if you want to get really mathy, I was told some people are doing semi-technical talks, so I don't know, this is semi-technical. You can look at fluctuation theorems, so you could look at thermodynamics of dynamical systems that are out of equilibrium. And you can generalize the second law of thermodynamics, which usually says entropy only increases or stays the same. It tells you that actually the universe favors, this is a ratio of probabilities of changing configurations of matter. The universe favors configurations of matter that dissipated heat. Right? It's exponentially more likely to dissipate heat and reconfigure itself than the other way around. So that's a basic fluctuation theorem. And then from that, you can derive actually, if you have a system that is driven, right? And Earth is a driven system. We have the energy of the sun just, coming and imparting energy onto Earth, and that gets captured and stored in various ways. But essentially, if you have a flux of energy coming into a system, actually the ratio of likelihoods of the system going into one state versus another is kind of it scales exponentially in terms of the ratio, or in terms of the difference of how much heat was dissipated along that path. And so the universe is exponentially biased towards configurations of matter and trajectories that dissipate heat. And so it turns out that life is really good at finding pockets of energy, finding pockets of drive here, of work, and consuming it for sustenance and further growth, right? And this kind of bias towards growth and consumption of resources in the world is literally fundamental to the laws of physics and where we came from. This is the force that, originated life and evolution itself, right? So that's a pretty fundamental statement. And so let's dive into that a bit, right? So, Jeremy England's theory, which I encourage you to read in his books, says that, this thermodynamic dissipative adaptation principle actually underlies evolution, right? Systems that are better at replicating, they're obviously better at securing resources towards being alive and replicating. And so they're burning more fuel and they're creating more heat. And so the universe likes that, right? But it turns out that you don't have to restrict yourself with this sort of law to just biology. You can apply it to basically any complex system today, from groups of people, culture, to companies, nations, etc. Right? In terms of what are the resources for groups or meta-organisms, it's capital, right? So if you replace kind of capital flow or energy flow by capital flow, you have a same sort of thermodynamic evolutionary principle, called thermodynamic dissipative adaptation. Essentially, the universe is exponentially biased towards things that grow and are efficient at utilizing their resources towards sustenance and growth, right? So, we have the market. The market likes to put capital into things that have a high expectation value of growth, right? And there's a sort of evolutionary pressure on not just companies, right? But on technologies as well, because companies are intimately linked with the products they sell, right? So there's a sort of there's an evolutionary pressure on the space of technologies and on the space of companies, on the space of capital allocators, on the space of everything, really. And so I try to, create a very broad term here. I call it the Hobo techno-capital mimetic. I added the mimetic because it's important for EAC, right? But, fundamentally, every bit of information, every choice of hyperparameter of everything around us, from how you run a company, from a certain culture, from your genetics to how you design a product, everything's getting post-selected for through this kind of principle for its ability to grow. Well, in fact, it's utility. It's post-selected for in terms of its utility or expected utility to help the whole system grow, right? Because the system as a whole is obeying these laws of physics that if you take, instead of a couple of molecules, you take civilization as a whole, futures where we find ways to consume more free energy and utilize it towards further growth and sustenance are exponentially more likely, right? Because the laws of thermodynamics apply at all, mesoscales. And so another thing here, I added the mimetic here. I usually say Homo techno capital, technology capital, and humans. But the memes are important as well, right? Memes can shape our reality. And so, EAC was kind of engineered more or less as a viral optimism, right? A viral cultural shift in optimism in order to influence the trajectory of civilization. Because ultimately, culture, technologies, humans, and the capital machine, we all co-evolve together. It's all intricately coupled and entangled, right? And so, the goal is to, via memes and spreading a new type of culture, induce more rapid civilizational growth, to accelerate effectively. And we'll define that potentially too formally very soon. So where are we going, right? How do you actually effectively accelerate, right? Okay, well, how do we define accelerating, right? Well, we just said that, earlier, where the universe is exponentially biased towards futures where we dissipate more free energy. Turns out there's a concept of just measuring on the log scale the total amount of energy that is consumed by civilization, and that's called the Kardashev scale, right? And if we use the Kardashev scale as kind of our reward metric, and I'm using the word reward here intentionally, it's really a great metric because we can't game it. It's not like the dollar that you can like unpeg, and then it's relative to something tangible, something physical that you can't game, right? You can't cheat this metric, right? And the reality is that, you might say, oh, well, scaling up free energy production is, maybe we'll just burn more energy for no reason, but at the same time, we're intelligent, energetic capital allocators, and we're going to find ways to use the extra energy towards utility, towards our sustenance and growth as a civilization. And we're only bound, our upper bound to how much progress we can have and how much utility we can produce is bound by this Kardashev scale, right? We can't support, how many humans, for example, we can support, tangibly, is bound, there's an upper bound due to the Kardashev scale. So scaling our energetic production and consumption is really the golden metric, and it's what the universe wants, really. And I don't know about you, but like fighting an exponentially strong fundamental force of the universe, I don't know, like I think we shouldn't fight it. I think this is what the universe wants, and so we can lean into it, right? We can lean into it. You can fight gravity, right? I don't know which floor you are. You could try it, right? You could try to not believe in it and just step out. I wouldn't suggest it, but you can test it, but you can't fight it. And so, the idea is instead of trying to align things around us toward our will, let's align our goals, to the laws of physics and the universe. Because ultimately, you either accelerate and scale up, right? You grow in terms of mindset, and or you get busy dying. So acceleration is life, and deceleration is death. And so those are the choices we have. And so this is getting a bit spicier, more formal. I was told Martin might have some technical slides, so I need to set the tone. But so, we talk in the original blog post, Space Lord and I, about Lyapunov exponents, right? How the world around us is really complicated, right? And so trying to figure out how to manage all of civilization in a centralized top-down fashion, from having models of the world with long-term extrapolation, it's literally provably impossible, right? You have kind of any sort of fuzz or uncertainty you have about any parameters really that you're measuring, they just blow up exponentially according to something called the Lyapunov exponent, and now you have this blob of uncertainty that becomes exponentially big. You can't steer that. So you should think of how to effectively accelerate figuring that out as an optimization problem. You could think of it as almost like an RL problem where you have a reward, and our reward is our current Kardashev scale, right? And we're looking for a gradient, right? We're looking how do we change our policy, right? Like what is our choice of actions given a state? How do we change the parameters of our policy in order to maximize the expected reward, right? Like if you do this hyperbolic discounting, because we have exponential buildup and uncertainty about the future, we have to exponentially discount our expected reward, right? Then how do I pick my actions today, right, that maximize the impact to growing, civilizational scope and scale? And that's the way you should be thinking. You should be thinking, how can I build technologies today that impact the world and help us grow in terms of our Kardashev scale number? But it could be technologies that are further out, but you've got to have hyperbolic discounting because you don't know what the future holds, right? And so that's what I mean when I say follow the Kardashev gradient, right? How do I change my thinking? How do I change what I do day to day to have the maximal expected impact on kind of stretched out temporal scale, right? What do we mean by embracing the variance? That's another way to effectively accelerate. Well, first of all, the techno-capital machine, really it's a hierarchy of capital allocation, right? You have, for example, in venture capital and startups, you have LPs, right, that inject capital in many funds, right, and they get selected for in terms of their capital allocation efficiency. You have funds that allocate capital to several startups, and then funds get more capital depending on their performance. And then you have startups that, depending on their capital allocation, who they hire, how they deploy their capital, get post-selected for in the market in terms of their ability to attract capital and grow, right? So you have this hierarchical kind of adaptive algorithm naturally, and that's great. And we should maintain that, right? If we overregulate it and kill the variance in this search space, we're not going to have progress, right? If there's a single company, it's kind of like inbreeding. You acquire kind of genetic mutational load, and instead of genetics, it's kind of hyperparameters. How do you run a company? How do you produce this technology? What are your design choices, right? If instead, what we should aim for is maintaining variance, but one thing we can do is actually collaborate with one another, right? By sharing knowledge and information, we can have a boost over kind of independent evolutionary algorithms, right? We can do more like swarm optimization, and there's some speed ups there. But what's important here is to maintain variance, because we can't get a feel for the landscape if we kill variance, right? Like the landscape of what is optimal policy, what is the optimal thing to do to help civilization grow, changes over time. So we got to be dynamically adaptive. And in order to maintain this dynamic adaptation, we have to maintain variance. And so, that's pretty much it. This is how you effectively accelerate. So, in closing, how can we effectively accelerate? Well, first of all, creating memes and creating a contagious culture of optimism that is pro-growth of the Homo techno-capital machine. So human headcount, better technology, more capital, more energy production. And we should aim to build technologies and do everything we can to birth these technologies that will impact the scope and scale of civilization, right? In terms of energy consumption and utilization towards further growth. So that means, for example, artificial intelligence. This is one of the highest leverage technologies, right? Because it's a meta technology. It's a technology that produces other technologies. Finally, by sharing knowledge and collaborating and not over-regulating ourselves to death, we can accelerate the techno-capital machine, embrace the variance, embrace its adaptation process, accelerate it, and accelerate everyone. That's it.
All right.